It was April 14th, 1945,
Cyanide capsules were all the rage in Germany.
and American soldiers were leading Albert Vogler to a armored car. Albert at the time was one of the greatest German steel magnates. But before Albert could get in the armored car, he collapsed to the ground and died after biting into a cyanide ampoule. It was only a year ago that he had told another industrialist named Frederick Flick that he was ready to take part in the reconstruction of Germany. Flick had been the richest man in Germany and would fare much better off than Albert. The Nuremberg trials were underway at the time, and they were hunting down rich, wealthy business owners that had exploited the Jews. Flick was accused of using 48,000 forced laborers and supporting the Nazi regime at the Nuremberg trials. The Americans and most of Europe wanted swift justice and even executions, but as the rabbit hole got deeper and deeper, it became clear that many American companies also helped support the Nazi regime. Companies such as Standard Oil, Dow Chemical, DuPont, and General Electric helped build tools and armor-piercing ammunition for Germany. But while these industrialists were facing their trials, another war was brewing in the background. A Cold War. Former allies had become enemies, and new alliances needed to be forged with former enemies. Rich industrialists like Flick claimed they were victims of anti-capitalist pursuit. Flick would only spend 3 years in prison and go on to become the richest man in Germany again. By 1948, the Marshall Plan had softened most of the punishments from the Nuremberg trials. Most of Europe did not agree with the Marshall Plan, but they needed America's help to rebuild. With the fear of spreading communism and the need for a strong industrialized West Germany, an urgent economic and geopolitical landscape demanded a shift from prosecution to rehabilitation. As the focus shifted away from punishing war criminals, early releases of prisoners convicted at the Nuremberg trials began in 1949, and by 1951 most of those sentences were commuted. George Marshall wanted the United States to focus on the future, not on the destruction from the war. The Marshall Plan erased trade barriers in Europe and fostered increased production, with 1948 to 1952 being the fastest period of growth in European history. Post-war starvation and poverty disappeared in Europe. Income levels also increased dramatically. The Marshall Plan also helped forge the United Nations. George Marshall wanted to rebuild all of Europe and offered the same amount of aid to the Soviet East Bloc. But Stalin refused Marshall's charity and urged the rest of Europe not to comply with the Marshall Plan. Stalin's Iron Curtain would divide Europe and stoke the fears of a Cold War. It seems like the Marshall Plan gave many Germans a get-out-of-jail-free card, but many believe it was more successful than the Treaty of Versailles, which imposed heavy reparations after World War I, including military restrictions and war guilt on Germany, which may have fueled Nazism, whereas the Marshall Plan offered financial aid to help rebuild all of Europe. So what do you think? Did the Marshall Plan step on Nuremberg's toes? Did we trade justice for economic prosperity? And did the means justify the ends?